Don, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone, and good morning to Nyla and anyone else who's in the North American area. My name is Ian Baxter. I'm the Marketing Director for EMEA for Saba. And I'd like to start, if the system works. Yes, here we go. I'd like to start with a question. So at the macro level, what is the biggest challenge affecting your business today? Perhaps if you can just think about that and start to enter some thoughts and ideas into the text chat. I see Blanche is already coming up with something.
And Ian, just to be clear, are we talking about the business as a whole or just the learning aspect? What's
the business as a whole.
The business as a whole, not just learning. Okay, let's
Correct.
see. Oh, profit, budget cuts. Jonathan says we're getting behind. If you could give us some more on that, Jonathan, that would be great. Gosh, there seems to be a bit of a common theme here, Ian. I don't know if you notice it.
Yeah, money, budgets, costs.
Yeah. Not that we're trying to lead the audience, and assessing ROI for learning adaptive change has done us. Good.
Okay, all right, that's some specific things. All right, thank you for that response. I'd like to look at this in a slightly different way. And you're right, most of the issues and challenges we face do point and ultimately end up in a pressure on profit, pressure on revenue, pressure on customer service and the like. But let's have a look at why this is occurring and what things are affecting us. So I think today we live in a very fast and changing dynamic world. So globalization means that competition can come from anywhere, and it arrives faster than ever. Products that were once rolled out country by country are now launched simultaneously all over the world. You only have to look at the way Apple launches its latest products to see this happening today, and they do it very, very well. Consumers have raised their standards and are becoming even more powerful. They're used to getting what they want, and they'll tell the world about it if it's not right. There's also a great resource for future product development, and we kind of ignore them at our peril. Similarly, governments are becoming more aggressive in pushing through more regulations in every area, whether it be working conditions, environmental impact, safety legislation, etc. Suppliers have to be more diligent and precise if they are to remain compliant and not subject to fines or bad publicity. We all know the impact of those. It's often in the news and it creates a big stir. And if these changes aren't enough, it's also clear that the pace of change is also accelerating. So not only is the world of work changing, it's changing more rapidly than ever. And I'm sure you can all see this happening in your own organizations every single day. So we've also seen this change occurring at an organizational level. So stepping down a bit, the ubiquitous organizational chart is being replaced by an informal network of connections, one between people who want knowledge and skills and people who have them. The days when senior management would set the goals and objectives for an organization and then drive them to completion is changing. Today, they set the goals, but the implementation and how it gets done is increasingly down to the employee. Companies are also operating in less isolation. There is, in effect, an extended enterprise of suppliers, contractors, distributors, and partners, all who play a vital part in the delivery of a company's value proposition, whether this be a product or a service. And it doesn't stop there. Today, your customer forms part of this value chain, dictating service levels and helping define future product direction. As a company with over 2,000 customers, we experience and gain immense value from them every day.
Sorry, Ian, I don't want to cut in, but we're getting a couple of comments that you're sounding slightly fuzzy or muted. In my experience, in these situations, the best thing to do is just to talk loudly and people understand you.
I am quite happy to increase the volume, but I do talk in a fuzzy way, so my apologies. No, okay, I'll push it up a bit.
Thanks.
Okay, so the people who make up your organization are also changing. It used to be that we could identify maybe 2 or 3 generations within a company. But when I consider the difference between my 2 children, one who's 15 and the other who's 12, they're very different in the way they interact with each other and their friends. As a father, no longer can I get them to respond to email or voicemail. It's now Facebook and text, and I'm certainly not the font of all knowledge. They are better connected than I am, and I'm certainly not their number one point of call. And to my mind, these are the future generations who will be entering the workplace. So when you add different cultures and geographies into the mix, you have a workforce cocktail, one that you need to harness and motivate. Similarly, we have all seen how technology has changed our lives. Most of us will use smartphones as part of our everyday life. In fact, not holding, or at least knowing where your iPhone or iPad is, can create a high level of stress and anxiety. We feel disconnected, out of touch, and I think we've all been there. New social software helps promote connections and interactions with other people, as and when we want it, and to a wider audience than ever before. It's always on, always there, and let's be honest, pretty irresistible. Using the internet, cloud-based software has evolved, enabling new functionality to be made available overnight. So no big upgrades or changes, it's just there when you next access the system. As a result of these changes in people, organizations, and technology, we believe there is a fundamental paradigm shift occurring. So up to now, we've all been used to operating in what I would term an information-centric world. If you look at the history of how technology has evolved in the service of business, it's easy to see how we got there. We started by creating databases, because that's what an information-centric technology runs on. Then we moved to applications that took advantage of the data, optimizing business processes along the way. This is where ERP systems came into their own, but they do not really suit the way we want to work. So as a result, a divide is emerging between this information-centric world and one which we call people-centric, a world where people are connected to each other, to ideas, to information they need both socially and in real time, where and when they want it. So when you put all these major trends together, you can see that there is a new world of work emerging, and that people are going to need new kinds of organizations to work in. The challenge facing most of us today is how to make this transformation. So this is what we've been working on at Saba to help companies make this transformation. We've taken advantage of the new technology to build a unified learning and talent management suite on a social and real-time collaboration platform. The Saba People Cloud has been 3 years in the making. It pulls from a rich heritage of experience to deliver a product for today's people-centric world. It's new, and the way people use it is new as well, and I think very exciting. So I'd now like to hand over to one of our customers who's using the Saba People Cloud. Nyla is the founding partner of the Educe Group. They have an interesting story about how their organization has been able to harness technology to great effect. Nyla, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Ian. And can everyone hear me okay? I can make adjustments if needed.
You sound quite clear now. I would just pump up the volume 15%.
How's that?
Sounds great.
Great. So, Ian, thank you very much for that setup. I think we are really in the middle of a perfect storm right now with people having to deal with limited resources, budgets being cut, the global economy affecting what initiatives we can take on. And as you mentioned, multiple generations, in the workforce at the same time, all requiring different approaches in order to get the benefits and meet the objectives that we set out. So at the Educe Group, we are a fairly new company. We were founded in 2003. And as a result, we have a benefit, I believe, that a lot of others don't. And that's that we did not have any legacy infrastructures that we had to deal with. So we were able to jump into this new world of work with a new mindset and really start anew. That definitely gave us a benefit, and I'll discuss that as we move forward today. But before I tell you more about the Educe Group, I have a question for all of you. Based on the background that Ian just gave us, what are you doing to prepare for this new world of work? And if you have any specific plans or initiatives, we'd be very interested to hear what those are.
And I think, Nyla, this is not something which is a matter of academic interest or something that we're just making up. Every organisation I talk to, everywhere I go, these sorts of changes are absolutely part of a new environment that people are working in. And Nick Emmett is asking, is the question addressed to you personally or in terms of the business? And Nyla, is it a personal question or a business question when we ask, what are you doing to prepare for it?
I'm thinking more from a business or organizational perspective.
Okay. We've got some answers coming through. Hans very succinctly says, moving from managing to facilitating. I'm taking it, Hans, you mean learning. It's quite a common answer. Blanche from Quebec says, informal learning, working out what actually works as opposed to just noise. Paul, I hear what you're saying. Jonathan, training, learning, trying to get my head around it and then spreading the cause. Min Kian says learning by working. So there's an emphasis here, if you like, Nyla, on informal, on collaboration, on L&D getting out of the way from being the source of information to being, if you like, more the facilitators and the providers of process that enable sharing. Plenty of stuff. Keep it coming through, guys. But Nyla, back to you.
Excellent, thank you. And one of the responses that I found very compelling is the learning by working, which is something that I definitely want to discuss today, and that was at the heart of the approach at the Educe group. So first, let me tell you a little bit about our company. We are a small business, as I had mentioned. We started with the concept that we didn't really need the traditional brick and mortar offices, and that we would build a virtual team and find talent wherever they happen to be and let them live in their towns and work out of their offices. And so right from the start, we had to build a structure that would facilitate this virtual team environment. Our business is consulting, so in terms of providing consulting services, we focus on HR technologies, which was great for this particular objective that we had internally because we had a lot of this information at the ready. But as a consulting organization, our business is knowledge, our assets are people, and so we had to create a very people-centric environment right from the start. Now, as you can see from the map I have here, we have a heavy presence on the East Coast, but then we have other employees that are spread about the center of the United States and the West Coast. Now, to further complicate our geographic situation, our client locations are also very spread out. So again, we have a lot of clients on the East Coast, but then they're spread across the country. And we also do work with our neighbor to the north, Canada, to the south, Mexico, and some limited work in the Netherlands and the United Kingdom. So our environment has a huge geographic spread, and that definitely posed a challenge for us. So with our office locations being spread out, lots of home offices and then actual offices in New York and Washington, D.C., and with the nature of our consulting business necessitating a significant amount of client travel, we knew from the start that we would always have to deal with a geographically dispersed population. And this was significant for us in two ways. One is that our expertise is always dispersed. So our senior people could be flying to a client site. They could be located in a home office in California, where all the people that might need their expertise are located elsewhere. We also had to contend with the fact that we had limited connectivity. So we might be on a client site for a week where we're not allowed to use their network. So we were restricted to getting online after hours or before hours. So how did we deal with this? Well, as we were a small company, and we still are, but relative to how we started out, we're significantly larger, we instituted in-person meetings twice a year, where we would just have everybody fly to some selected location and go through training, do product updates, do a lot of team building, and really build that collaborative environment based on an in-person process. We also leveraged web conferencing ability, so we'd have weekly status meetings that anyone could dial into if they were available. And then on a monthly basis, we also use that web conferencing capability for all-hands deep dives to keep our knowledge up to date. Two other resources that we had were Educe all emails. So we basically created a distribution list with everyone on it, and anytime somebody needed help or had a tip or trick to share, they would just send it out to the entire population. And we had a document repository where people were instructed to put any project documentation or other resources that they thought people would find useful. So that's how we started out. And it was great. But as we began hiring more and more people, this really wasn't enough. And from a cost perspective, flying everyone around to meet up twice a year wasn't very scalable either. So in 2010, we experienced a great amount of growth, and one-third of our employees were new. So at this point, we really had to reflect on this virtual team that we were building and also the in-person onboarding model that we used. I failed to mention that as we hired new people, we would always fly them to either our New York or DC office. And one or more of our senior people, depending on how many new hires we had, would meet with them for 3 days to really just do almost like a boot camp of all the different things that that we would want that person to learn as we onboarded them. And I love the comment about the reduce all, educe all emails. That actually became a large part of our business case and objectives. So let's move on to those objectives. We decided to be very clear and create 2 main objectives. So as a consulting company, we had the external objective of improving our speed of response. So we wanted to really look at how long it took us to get back to clients with answers to their questions. So not so much the large kind of project-based initiatives that would take a lot of analysis, but quick questions like, is this technically feasible? Can I perform this function using this specific product? Things like that where we felt we should be able to give a very rapid response. And at the same time, we also looked internally, and we wanted to empower our employees. So when we started out, we were hiring a lot of people that already had industry experience, many of them who we had known and who we had worked with, and they already felt empowered. We were very collegial, very collaborative, and as we hired new people who maybe were less experienced, we started looking to colleges and hiring recent graduates, and also people who might be coming in from different industries. We realized we needed to create, in order to be effective and to be able to maintain our growth and the level of expertise that our customers had come to expect, we needed to better empower our employees to find information on their own and to reach out to others within the company to get the knowledge that they needed. So overall, our campaign was really to accelerate the effectiveness of our virtual team. And we came up with 5 tangible ways that we wanted to improve things. So the first was improving access to organizational knowledge. Even though we had these document repositories, we didn't know how well they were being used. We also, as Jasmine had pointed out, wanted to reduce the use of email as a method of knowledge exchange. Because when you are traveling to somewhere remote and trying to download all of your email at the end of a busy day, the last thing you need are 300 Educe all emails, of which only 20% are relevant to you. We wanted to reduce dependency on experts. So we found that a couple people were being approached constantly for questions that might not have been all that complex, but no one really knew who else to go to. So they're going to the most senior people in the company to ask questions regardless of their complexity. We also wanted to reduce new hire onboarding time, and this points to some of the responses that we got in the beginning in terms of the biggest business challenge. As a small business, we have limited resources, and the sooner that we could get people out and billable in a consulting engagement, the better. So that was one metric that we really looked at. And we also wanted to improve the onboarding experience, because what we were seeing was that as we were growing, people who didn't have any background in the industry and didn't know us before were coming in hoping for a lot of guidance. But because we were enjoying a certain measure of success, people were flying everywhere to client meetings and didn't have that time that they used to have to sit down with people and really introduce them to our organization. So that's where we started out. And we looked at a number of different solutions. I do want to state that part of our objective was not to just go and find a social solution. So we really stuck, in fact, I'm going to go back for a moment. We really stuck with those two main objectives. How do we improve our speed of response, and how do we empower our employees? And thought about both technology and non-technology solutions. And so after a lot of investigation, we decided on the Saba People Cloud for a number of reasons. And this was the technology portion of our solution. We really liked the idea of everyone being able to contribute. We liked the ability to reuse the information that was put into the system and find it very easily. Our plan was to give first day access for new hires, so even if people weren't able to sit with them all day, they could do a lot of self-investigation and exploration in terms of our resources and the people that were part of our company, and start reaching out using that technology. So for the next several slides, I'd like to talk about how we actually went about implementing this solution. But before I do that, I have another question for you. And that is, what steps would you take to implement a social learning platform in your organizations?
Nyla, there's always this moment after you ask a question of silence and trepidation. Has anybody heard? Is anybody writing? But trust me, it's everybody reaching for their keyboards and thinking as they do so, what steps would it take to implement a social learning platform? What's the technology you might need? How might you get people ready for it? What issues might you see in terms of resistance possibly to it, or over-enthusiastic use? And we've got a collection of different results, different reactions coming through. Blanche focusing on the technology, talking about the forums, the blogs, the technology you might use. Paul talking about Yammer as well, the technology, but Nick Emmett too, and Paul Birchall focusing more on the need to get buy-in. Michelle has one thing to say, she says it 3 times, promotion, 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 and Hans similarly focuses on the communication plan. Goodness me, plenty of good stuff here. Luke, I like your point. Start with small groups, get a good buzz going. Yasmin, use our existing online platform. Yeah, start with the people who are already. Great. Sorry, I could go on reading the stuff forever. Nyla, let's hear how you did it. Back to you.
Excellent. So what I'd like to do is set up this framework and go over 5 specific steps that we went through in our implementation. So I'll hit these at a very high level here, but then I'd like to go into each of them in some detail. The first step, and a number of you put in comments to this effect, was understanding our organizational readiness. So what is our current situation? How accepting would our population be to this change? How are we going to be able to promote it? And what were our restrictions? What were the things that we just weren't ready to address yet? So we took a look at that. The next 3 items, seeding data, considering our search strategy, and finding our experts, were all very detailed steps that we went through in our implementation to ensure that we were setting the system up for success, that people would want to adopt this system, that there was a reason for them to use it. And then I think it was Nick. There have been so many comments, I can't see it now on the chat window, but who said something about the importance of driving value out of the system rather than making, I'm paraphrasing here, but rather than making the technology the objective. And that was inherent in our entire approach. What value are we going to get out of this thing? We have limited resources, both people-wise and money-wise, and this had to show something of value. We weren't going to implement a social platform just for the heck of it to say that we had one. It needed to be linked to very discrete and discernible business objectives for us. And then our last step was deploying a soft launch, which I think was critical to our success because we were able to make adjustments before we went full force using the system. So first, in terms of understanding organizational readiness, I think that 2 main things to consider are what's the history of collaboration within your company. And I'm not talking about use of wikis and blogs and technology-based collaboration, but what is the history or the culture within your company to collaborate with each other anyway? Do people typically work individually at their desks and do as much as they can on their own? Or do you already have an environment where people enjoy talking to each other and asking for reactions on different initiatives that they're working on? We also wanted to investigate comfort with technology. We have a lot of employees that are in their 20s. And so there is not only a comfort with technology, but an expectation that wherever they arrived in their post-college years was going to afford them the same access to technology during the workday that they experienced outside of work using Facebook and Pandora and everything else that they're plugged into. So those two items, the history of collaboration, the comfort with technology, I think are critical for any organization to really look at. We also wanted to look at common objections. So, you know, people were very concerned, like what if we have data out there that's not accurate, and how are we going to control what people contribute? And so we did analyze this a bit. I will say that for our organization, this wasn't as relevant because people were so anxious, even without this platform, to make sure and contribute things that were of value. And being a very people-centric organization already, people knew that their respect within the organization or their position in the organization was based on the knowledge that they had. And so people take out, not that this doesn't happen in other organizations, but you could see in ours that people took a lot of pride in data being accurate and making sure that whatever they put out there was appropriate and relevant. I do think, though, when we were looking at different platforms, this was something that, we were hoping that it would work out, that the data that came out in our organization was accurate, but we were still looking for mechanisms to monitor these things and be able to take away data or restrict where we needed to. And we did find that ability within Saba. So our essential, organizational readiness summary was that on the pro side, we already had this great culture of collaboration. We're early adopters. We're happy with technology. Our cons are that people weren't so great at loading documents. So we looked at our document repository and found huge gaps. We also were never going to have a resource that was dedicated to managing this thing. So it really had to be something that, kind of got legs on its own and just worked. We also kind of figured out that we're a bunch of know-it-alls. So, we knew that everyone was going to have their way of, like, this is how we should use it, and we had to address that as well in deploying this product. The second thing that we did after we assessed our readiness was looking at what data we wanted to start out with. So we needed a reason to drive people to this system. And the things we considered are what data has no home, and what repositories can be replaced. So we took a look at data that had never been really placed in our underused document repository. We looked at all the information that we had sitting in these Educe all emails, and we set a goal that we would take a lot of that Educe all information and put it in the system to start. And then all kinds of internal resources that we had never really loaded anywhere that was being disseminated to people through, urban legend, really. We wanted to find a place for that as well. The other thing that we wanted to do is really, and I think I'd mentioned this before, really examine why will employees use this system? How are we going to drive that adoption? So, number one, it needed to save them time. It needed to reduce rework. And then because we had this situation where people are spread out geographically, where people worked on all crazy hours, we needed to make sure that everything got into the system in a way that it could be leveraged anytime, anywhere, and more quickly than how they did it today. So to that end, we looked at the functionality on the system, and we did a mapping of here are the different activities we think that people are going to use on this system, and here are the methods that we are going to try and drive them toward for that specific activity. So for example, vetting new ideas. If somebody's working on a potential solution for a client, and we want them to look at mock-ups that we've done or some sort of solution, we said, okay, here are 3 places in the system that could be used. We can use ideas, we can use ratings, we can use discussion. And in order to launch this in a really meaningful way, even though we evaluated all of these methods, we did not launch with all of these methods available. So we really targeted people to specific items to start so that it would not be overwhelming. We also modeled ideal entries. So for example, here are a number of tags that we want you to use. If you put up a document, here's a type of description we want. Here, here is how it should be presented and where it should be presented so that people could find it. And same with discussions. Third, we really examined our search strategy. So we learned from our document repository, from SharePoint, from other experiences, that people still couldn't find what they needed. And that really reduced the efficacy of the systems that we already had. We had been creating these silos of information. So if you were in projects in healthcare, you were kind of in a healthcare silo. If you were projects in manufacturing, you were in a manufacturing silo. And we just wanted to get rid of that. We wanted a very searchable solution so that no matter what keyword you put in, where you sat in the organization, what kind of projects you did, you could find these items much more easily. This is something where I found Saba People Cloud to really excel. The unified search allows you to bring back people who have an expertise in an area, documents that have been loaded to the repository, any discussions that address your keywords all at the same time. So in this particular example, I just typed in custom reports. And I can see in one view the files, the discussions, the links, the people that have anything like this in their profiles. And then I can further reduce it to a specific type of resource I want, or even a specific person who has contributed a number of these resources. The fourth thing we did was looking at how we publicize internally the different expertise we had. And this goes back to our goal of reducing the amount of requests that came to our most senior people. And so we really changed our definition of expert and decided, look, everyone is an expert in something. It might be that you have that base level 1 knowledge in learning management systems or in recruiting or something else, but we need to make that very public to the rest of our employees so that people could be better leveraged for what they knew. And so we worked on building profiles where different engagements would be listed, certifications that people had. And also one of the things I really like is that the contributions that you put into the system are directly linked to your profile. So you're able to say, hey, I really liked that one document that Young loaded that he did for a client. I want to see what else he's done, and maybe I can use as a template, or maybe I can leverage some of the other work that he has completed. The last thing we did was deploy a soft launch. So we wanted to do something real. We didn't want to create activities and have this fake user acceptance test. We said, let's just put it out there in a very controlled, targeted way and see what happens. And then go back and make adjustments as needed. And we did this with new hire training because that was really our most urgent need. We created a one-stop shop within Educe Connect, so all of the curriculum, all of the HR forms, everything they needed was put out there. We also launched, outside of the technology, a mentoring program at the same time. But the way we set it up was not that you were going to have, a little lunch with your mentor and sit around and meet in person every week. But we set it up from a technology perspective so that there were different check-ins with that mentor, and you could easily chat with that person, look at their profile, and get to know them virtually. We positioned this so that it was very self-service directed, so there were certain things that we wanted our employees to do, but we also wanted them to explore. And we set up forums for questions and answers within the new hire cohort so that they could leverage themselves in terms of answering questions and really build the connections amongst all the new hires. And that was successful, I'm pleased to say. So then our next step was to bring performance onto the system. We had been using a separate system, and so we started by putting all of our organizational goals into the system and requiring that any individual goal on a plan was directly aligned to an organizational goal, so that anything that someone's working on during the year is creating business value and directly pointing to something that our organization wanted to achieve. And then we are also looking at 360 assessments and competencies. Now, and that's going to be launched actually later this month as we close out the year. And we're planning to get internal and external participation on those 360 ratings. Now, one of the things that I haven't said explicitly, but I'm hoping that it's coming through, is that the value that we're getting out of the system is that it's becoming a daily part of the routine. You come here to look for HR forms. You come here to, check the status on your performance goals. You come here to connect with people, to look for files that are project-based or internally based. And so it's definitely been very much embedded into our daily processes. And I think that that's one of the reasons why it has been successful. I can't remember the name of the person who in the very beginning mentioned adoption. And that was something that, throughout this process, we really thought about. Like, if you're a newcomer, what do we expect you to do? And what's the path that we are hoping that you will follow? So, if you're a new hire, most likely you're I hate this word, but it's what's used in so much of the literature, a lurker. So you're looking at the resources that are out there, but you might not actually be contributing. So our expectation is that at first, people are just going to explore, and then hopefully they're going to build a network and start to get to know their peers better. And then when they're comfortable, they'll start putting out resources and then maybe take a more of a leadership role in moderating or monitoring a group. So to summarize, we went through these 5 steps. We were able to consolidate multiple systems that we have into a single application, really drive the use of this system. We created seed data and really considered our search strategy in order to create examples that we wanted people to follow. And then we also worked to build our employee profiles in order to expand our definition of who an expert is and really drive people to use their fuller network rather than going to our senior team. And then we were able to launch in a targeted way, addressing new hire onboarding, and expand from there. So I think that this has come up throughout the chat window. A platform isn't good if you can't measure an actual business impact. So my question for you here is, how would you measure the impact of a platform such as this?
I think that's brilliant, Nyla. You notice the question is coming up, and what you do is you throw the question back at the audience to answer rather than answering it yourself. That's absolutely the way to handle a group like this. But we've got a bunch of answers coming through.
Excellent. As people continue to put their answers up there, I'm going to go ahead and move on to make sure that we have enough time for questions at the end. So I'm going to get a bit geeky here for a moment and harken back to those Econ 101 classes that you probably took. And there was something called the von Thunen philosophy, and it was a set of concentric circles, and the premise behind it was that back when food was distributed via horse and cart, you basically had 3 days to get to all of your distribution channels before that food would rot. So day 1, you drive 15 miles, you sell your wares. Day 2, you keep going. Day 3, that's pretty much it. So taking that into our industry, what we were looking at was basically a 3-day turnaround, 2 to 3 day turnaround for some new hire to be able to go out, work on a client site, have questions, and get the answer. And the reason for that could be because they were using email, and maybe they're asking me and I'm traveling, and I don't get to it. They don't know who else to get to. I think there were a number of reasons for the length of time. Well, clearly, this was not acceptable because in this day and age of technology and everything just getting more and more rapid, the expectation is that everything's going to happen that day. And so by putting all the different things that we determined needed to be out on this platform, our hope was that Brandon, who I have here in the center, was going to be able to do a lot of work independently or by leveraging experts online, his colleagues, to get the information he wanted in that day. And then also from a measurement perspective, specifically for our new hires, we wanted to examine the time to deployment. Can we get them out to a client site quicker? Time to fly solo. At what point can we send them out on their own rather than on a team and have them be successful? And then time to expert. When can they actually be a resource for others? And then on an organizational level, we looked at our resourcing response. Were we able to better staff our engagements because we knew the expertise that each of our employees had by looking at this system? Did our client satisfaction ratings change? And then do we respond to opportunities more quickly? So I have some specifics for you. Going back to the objectives that I stated in the beginning, the external objective was speed of response. And this was pretty remarkable for us. Our client response time decreased from 2 to 3 days to less than an hour. And it's because somebody is always on this system, and the minute that someone puts up a question, somebody gets back to them. So we are, in many situations, able, while we're sitting in a client meeting, to post a question and get the answer before that meeting even ends. That was very significant for us. We also, I'm proud to say, eliminated those annoying Educe all email distribution lists. And now everything goes into a reusable format onto our discussion boards. In terms of employee empowerment, we have 100% employee retention. No one has left our company willingly since 2010. So I realize that part of this might be because the economy isn't so great and so there's nowhere to go, but I'm going to take this as a success for our platform, that people really feel engaged. Even if they're at a home office, they feel very connected to their colleagues. They're able to, they feel empowered to get the information they want and proceed with their work. We also reduced time to deployment for our new hires from months to weeks. And we've seen an increase in overall collaboration. So even though we had this collaborative culture to begin with, one of the things that we've seen is now if someone's on a project, instead of just coming up with their solution and sending it out, they're actually posting questions and ideas more than were discussed before this technology and getting input. So our solutions are definitely more solid. I'm sure some of you saw this picture on the news from Hurricane Sandy. And I don't know if I mentioned, I am sitting in San Francisco at the moment, but I work and live in Manhattan. So interestingly enough, the Educe New York City office is on the 14th floor of the building that's right next to this dollhouse building that you're seeing. One of the unintended benefits that we had with this system, because we have been using it very diligently, is that even though I had no power, no heat, no way to get up to the 14th floor of this office building for a week, none of our client work suffered because people were able to get everything that I had been working on in flight and continue on. That was really significant for us. And then finally, what's next? Extending our network. So now that we feel like we have a good, solid foundation within our employee base for using the system, our next plans are to make limited sections of the system available to our clients so that they can access their own project information and collaborate with our employees. And with that, Ian, I will turn it over to you.
Nyla, thank you very much. Well, I hope everyone's been able to see how adopting the platform that combines obviously as the social capabilities with learning and talent management can lead to some significant improvements in organizational performance. And just one of the points made, it's not just about a social platform in isolation. I think if you're just looking at a social platform in isolation, you will only get part of the solution, and it will only take you so far. I think you need to be looking at a more unified solution that brings in the areas of learning and talent and performance, as well as the ability to interact real time as well as socially. Otherwise, you will only be able to kind of realize some of the benefits that are being talked about. And I think the other thing it's illustrated to me is that best practice points to a structured and logical approach as opposed to an anarchic approach where you just throw it out to people and say, hey, this is a great tool and why don't you use it? And if you look at it like that, although it seems to be counterintuitive to what social is about, because the argument is always, well, no one showed me how to use Facebook, I think when you come to an organization, I think you do need structure and you do need to control the way people use it, because it's like riding a bike, but it's a very new bike. You need stabilizers first, you need someone to show you how, and then you can start to move forward. Now, the Educe group is a small but nimble company, and some of you are probably thinking, and I've certainly seen it in the comments, that such a transformation would not be possible in your organization. However, if you look at some of the clients that where we have deployed the product, you'll see that in the main they are not small. And I think in each company, the implementation was based on a finite business case, and this is absolutely key. It's got to be a finite business case focused on a known problem or issue with a clear, measurable outcome. If you know what you're trying to solve, if you know where you're trying to get to, and you can then backfill to the product, then you have a greater chance of being able to deliver against that metric. So I call out an example would be Medtronic. They had an inside sales team of probably about 2,000 people, and in that team they had a high level of attrition, and primarily people were getting fed up pretty quickly and moving out of the organization. One of the reasons for this is they weren't particularly connected to the organization. They didn't feel as though they could be effective. They weren't making their numbers because they didn't have the knowledge, and there was a general lack of motivation, and the net result was people left. In addition, the onboarding process at Medtronic within this division couldn't keep up with the rate of attrition. So they've used the Saba People Cloud in a couple of ways. One, they've used it to try and connect new people when they come into the organization. They collect them to experts, they collect them to information, they collect them to rated learning that will help them bring them online. They've tagged content and information so that they can very quickly search on solutions to problems that they're facing. So they've made them, to Nyla's point, more self-reliant more quickly. And so this has really helped with keeping people there. It's also helped with the onboarding process because there's less formal time needed to take people through training courses, flying them around. They just effectively self-enable themselves. And that means that it's cheaper for them to do it, the results are better, people come up to speed better, and you have less attrition as a result. And just as another example, Saba as a company, we also use this product, and everybody in our company uses it today. And it started with the engineering and the product management group. Well, it should do because they were the guys that put it together. And very quickly they started to work out how to make it deliver value to them as a small group. And then slowly they started adding other groups in. So from product management, they went to product marketing, and then there was a big step. The big step was to go into the sales organization. And then once the sales organization accepted it, and once the sales organization started to run with it, it soon became apparent that this is a product that we could take across the whole organization. And I think there was a comment made by Nigel, and I apologize, Nigel, if I don't know you. It was Nigel Baines. Made a comment about how can you tell whether it's successful. Well, I would say that in our company, if we mentioned or hinted that we were going to turn it off, I think there would be outcry because everybody is so reliant on it for so many things. And I think that is also a very good and true measure of how successful a product has become in a company. I think the other thing to look at is that in these companies, the implementation was controlled, and only when the results known and the process is understood, the companies then started looking, in the same way that Nyla has, as wider application and deployment. So they either looked at bringing in more groups, or as Nyla did, she started looking at bringing in more functionality. And this is functionality that's over and above just a social platform. So I think all of these companies, whether they be large or small, and whatever industry, they've all started to make the transformation we've talked about. So really, on behalf of Nyla and I'd like to thank you and the Learning Skills Group for your time and the opportunity to present today. And I hope that if you require any further information, you'll contact us. We'd certainly like to hear from you. And now it's really open for questions, Don, if we have any time.
We have questions. We have a bit of time, not a great deal of time. One of the, I have to say, I mean, everyone's saying in the chat area, great presentation, and it was. And of course, one of the issues, I always try to get people to speak for a short amount of time, but in this case, I thought the story was so good, it was certainly worth just having the presentation last longer. It's been extremely valuable. The corollary is we have less time for questions, but I think it was worth it, as everyone will agree. Nyla, great story, really well told. Let's just bring up a couple of questions, and then I think the key question for me revolves around the existing culture of collaboration, something you drew out early on. So just one question from Dallas then. Dallas, the person, not the place. I think Dallas is actually in Orlando, paradoxically. Dallas asks, how can new technologies like Twitter, TweetDeck, Facebook and Google Plus be incorporated into this? And I think a legitimate answer is, well, actually, it can't, or we don't want them to be. So do you incorporate? Do you think it's a good idea to? Do you prefer to have a self-standing platform? What's your view, Nyla?
So for me, I prefer, this is my personal opinion, I prefer to have a self-standing platform because I use Facebook to share, family pictures and social events and things that probably wouldn't be very interesting to my employees, nor would I want them necessarily to see everything. That being said, though, I use Twitter much more on a professional level, and we have not used the capability within our platform, but Twitter is embedded. So, I think that the question always comes up between sort of the public and private persona and where things need to be segmented. So for us at this point in time, it's a standalone platform. We haven't integrated those tools.
Fine.
Don, can I just add to that?
Go ahead, Ian.
I think Nyla raises a good point, and I would agree with her on the Facebook piece. Facebook, I think, it's about your home life and probably shouldn't be part of work. But Twitter definitely is something that we use at work, and I'm in marketing and we use it a lot. And just to Nyla's point, it's so easy to integrate Twitter within the Saba People Cloud. It's one or two clicks and it's up there and running. So I think Nick made a comment about, I'm not sure you would want to integrate with those tools myself. It's very easy, Nick. It literally is a couple of buttons press and you're away and using it. I'm
not sure Nick was pointing to any technical difficulties with it, but perhaps pointing to your and Nyla's point about Facebook and the possibility of picking up a lot of extraneous noise in contrast to what you've described, Nyla, which is a very business-focused I was going to say a learning platform. It goes well beyond that. It's a platform that supports the entire organization in everything it does. As you pointed out, when the organization being able to support it, it was able to support the organization after Sandy. Okay, look, there's lots of stuff coming through, and Adrian's just asking, this is a very product specific, but Alex is asking, no, it was Adrian, can you integrate LinkedIn as well? Because LinkedIn is the other social platform which perhaps is a little bit more work-focused than personal-focused.
The answer is yes. Again, it's a couple of clicks to just put it onto your desktop as part of the Saba People Cloud.
Nick Emmett says, I was correct in my telepathic assumption of the thinking behind this question. Great, Nick. I'm delighted I managed to get through to that. But it's great that you can integrate those tools. It's always a tough question. We had it earlier. How much do you go from where people are and the tools they're using? How much do you try to keep it within one standalone platform? This is a great example of a standalone platform working really well. Another question we had in our webinar earlier today was, what about the business impact? No question here. Clear business impact can be demonstrated with one particular metric. And then I think, as everybody pointed out, there's a whole host of other intangibles that come along with it. the issue with business impact is always, well, let's just show one thing. Let's not try to show everything. Let's show one thing that really demonstrates that this is valuable. No question that you've done that. Fantastic. Look, we could talk about this all day long because it's a great story and it's something a lot of people are dealing with, but the time has once again caught up with us. It is 3 o'clock in the UK. It is 10 o'clock on the eastern coast, and you'll just about be waking up now, Nyla, because it must be getting up to 7 o'clock in San Francisco, where you are.
Right. My alarm's about to go off. I will offer, Don,
Yes.
I know there were a number of questions that we did not get to, and I went a bit long. I believe that you had put up the Twitter hashtag. And I have my Twitter handle up here. I'm happy to continue the conversation on Twitter after this if anyone is interested.
Super. Let me just drop that again into the text chat area as well so everyone can pick it up. Here we go. That's Nyla's contact details, her email, and also Twitter hashtag. Well, not hashtag, but a Twitter handle, Nyla Reid. Frustrating, as always, to wrap up, well, a good present. Sorry, Hans has your hand raised. Hans, if you've got a question, please drop it into the text chat area. If it was an accidental raising of the hand, I'm just going to carry on. Oh, great webinar, he says. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Hans. I think Hans was meaning to clap his hands rather than raise one. Don't need to apologise, Hans. The thought is well taken. And I'd like to say on behalf of everybody else, thank you to Ian of Saba and Nyla of Educe. Thank you for really well-told story that speaks to so many issues that people have got and shows success. Fantastic. Success in so many ways. You did it, it worked, and guess what? You could prove value. Thank you, of course, to everyone in the room for your great insights. I particularly liked the discussion, which is crucial, around the culture of sharing, so important when we start going down this road. It doesn't all rely on the technology, but it can certainly get us a long way there. So thanks for your participation. Once again, Ian Baxter and Nyla Reid, thank you for bringing this to us. Time now for me just to wrap up with our... Sorry, I'm having trouble actually using my mouse today. To wrap up with our final piece of housekeeping, that's the hashtag. If you're in touch with Nyla, obviously her handle, Nyla Reid, is the most important thing, but please do drop the hashtag as well in if you want to continue the conversation online. Who knows, we may pull other people into it as well. Certainly the conversation is worth having. Is everything available? Yes, it is. That's the URL you go to, and I'm going to just drop the that information into the text chat area so you've got it to hand. There we go. And that's the recording, slides, and the web chat are all going to be available online. It may not be till Monday for various technical reasons, but I know there'll be plenty of people wanting to have another look at the recording. Oh, the Learning Technologies Conference, yes, that's coming up, and that'll be 29th and 30th of January. Please do go and register. Of course, the conference is a paid-for event, and the exhibition is a free event. We have some great speakers at the conference, I have to tell you. Go and check it out at the URL. There we go. And finally, our next webinar is coming up on November the 22nd. Please put that in your diary, and I look forward to seeing you there. Once again, everybody in the room who's pitched in and contributed, thank you so much. Nyla and Ian, thanks so much for a great story well told.